Jaro, and here he is. Joel is with us again today. It's good to have you back, Joel.
Thanks for having me again, Phil. Really appreciate it. It's good to
Oh
see you.
man, I'm sure everybody remembers when you were with us last month, but this time we're talking about maintaining a healthy mind, right? And with everything kind of going on, everything kind of crazy, we have to try and do that. But tell the folks just a little bit about who you are first, and then we'll kind of go into a little bit of Q&A.
Sure, I'll focus mostly on my professional background. I'm a licensed psychotherapist. I've been practicing for many years, and I do primarily uh, work with individuals and couples, spanning from young adults to older adults. Um, I also do consulting with corporations, universities, nonprofit settings in terms of dealing with mental health issues that may be affecting their particular environment, whether it be students, whether it be employees, or just tensions that sometimes arise between management and employees. I've consulted and do consult with Fortune 500 companies to sort of put out fires that exist with that. This is more being done virtually now these days than it was in the past, but I used to do that more on a personal level. And yeah, I've been doing this work, I said, for a very long time. I enjoy sort of spreading messages that resonate for me and hopefully resonate for the audience as well.
Yeah, I think that especially right now, I've spoken to a few mental health specialists, and they said they are busy because they're really dealing with different aspects of the family issue, the relationship issues,
Sure.
parenting. Kids are now, having to select between being, homeschooled and going to school, and, the anxiety of parents and all of that. So I want this program to really just kind of help all the folks out there that are watching, that are dealing with these internal struggles per se, and kind of helping to get over that. So my first question is really just, how do you maintain a sense of control, like during a crisis like this? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, well, it's not an easy thing to do, but it does start with attitude. And you just mentioned schooling. I work with a number of teachers as well as parents of kids and the kids themselves that are, say, I work with young adults and up, so they might be senior in high school and into college. And yes, it's definitely a challenge to be working remotely. There are logistical challenges involved in terms of, especially for the smaller kids, which a lot of my colleagues are dealing with, in terms of having to deal with them remotely, and also the teachers that have to work with these kids remotely that may have really serious issues. So, and they're overwhelmed. I have to tell you this, just as a general statement, that teachers are working harder than ever right now. So it is a challenging period for them. They had to learn a lot in terms of just the technology of working remotely, and the volume is increasing because a lot of schools have downsized and things of that nature. So I'm sort of on the inside of that right now, in addition to dealing with the parents and kids. That being said, we don't have a, well, I'm going to qualify that. I was going to say we don't have a choice in the matter, but I don't want to contradict myself. We always have a choice. So I try to impart upon all the people I'm working with, whether it be the teachers themselves, and there's a high number of them, or people at higher levels of administration within the schools, or the parents, or the kids, or just people in general, that we all have choices. Now, the kids have limited choices in terms of the way things are structured. And yes, the parents have limited choices in terms of how their school district or the region they live in chooses to school. But we all have to adapt accordingly. It's not something we ask to come upon us, but we have to make the best. It's sort of the, make lemons out of lemonade, make lemonade out of lemons kind of situation. And I think for many people, it's a challenge. They get caught up in a state of anger and frustration, and that makes what may appear to be a bad situation a lot worse. And it's the same thing with the teachers I work with. While acknowledging that this is very difficult, it's very challenging, It is a choice. We always have choices. Is it an easy choice to say I'm gonna give up teaching and find another profession? Of course not. But it is a choice. And most people aren't going to make that choice in the middle of a school year. So basically, it is and it isn't a choice. Your choice
Right.
is you need to work,
Mm-hmm.
right? Your choice
Mm-hmm.
is you have to adapt to circumstances that are outside of your control. How do you adapt to it without being in a state of anger, in a state of
Right.
frustration, and a state of resentment? And this goes across the board. And that's what we have to look inside, Phil. We have to dig really deep and just say, for example, as hard as it may be right now for a teacher, it's not going to go on forever. And I'm grateful that I have a job
Mm-hmm.
because my next door neighbor has been out of work for 6 months.
Wow.
And they think, okay, yeah, I'm not thrilled about having to work till 7 o'clock some nights,
Mm-hmm.
but this isn't going to last forever. You could actually parlay this into, if you really step it up right now, maybe you'll parlay this into something greater for yourself when the pandemic ends. And it will.
Right.
Maybe
Right.
maybe you have aspirations to be an administrator or something,
Mm-hmm.
if you have those. And even if you don't, this is your calling. Your
Right.
calling is to be a teacher. My
Yeah.
calling is to be a therapist. Your calling is to be a bon vivant man about town, cosmopolitan man that wears too many hats, but you do it all. But so that's really what I want to impart is how do we look internally and get into a state of gratitude when everything around us is seemingly out of our control.
Right. Right.
Seeming.
Seemingly, and you got to think about, like, I think about the anxiety around even just being in the police force, or
Sure.
being in working in a hospital.
Sure.
Like you said, people who are unemployed right now and just trying to figure out what to do next. Those are really all anxious, positions to be in. And I don't know, what would you say to, like, a person that's, like, works at a hospital and they have to go into work, knowing there's a virus there, or a police officer who knows that, there's situations out there that is escalating, and it's like you have to deal with the balance of it, of we have to maintain a balance of justice per se versus I need to survive, and come back to my family, kind of a
Not
thing.
too loaded a question with the with the police aspect, but
Mhm.
that's a harder ask because I
Right.
think what I was going to do, and maybe you sort of telepathically read my mind, is that when I was referencing the other individuals, and that includes
Right.
myself, by the way, we sometimes we do have to place ourselves in comparison too, and a lot of people don't like doing that, but we do
Mm.
because it is all relative. That's a harder ask to tell
Right.
a cop to just chill out and relax. It's
Right.
a harder ask to tell an ICU nurse just chill out and relax when you're
Right.
surrounded by COVID all day.
Mhm.
That's more about just lending support, and I think it's good that the general public, for those who believe in that have the
Mhm.
affinity and the inclination to support the frontline people, and that includes supermarket people, by the way.
Right. Exactly.
What we do
Absolutely.
is good.
Absolutely.
It's not
Yeah.
relative to rank, as it were. These are people that I actually have a particular level of empathy for because their options are somewhat limited, and they're working.
Mhm.
If they're working for minimum wage, that's a lot. If they're not
Yeah.
being cheated out of that, that's a tough ask as well. It's a tough
Mhm.
ask, but nonetheless,
Right.
it is a choice. But we do have to look in comparison too. So with the people that are on the more dangerous, as it were, front lines, and I think it all has an element of concern to it. That's more about lending support and not really trying to get them to change an attitude. That would be an insult to them, to
Right.
the really the highest of the high line frontline
Mhm.
workers. The other people that are most people don't fall into that category, by the way, right? I
Right.
mentioned
Right.
probably if I went a couple more, that would have pretty much covered the gamut in terms of maybe restaurant workers and
Mm.
pharmacies and things of that nature, but it doesn't go way beyond that. So most people don't fit into that category. Most people
Mm.
work remotely. So we have to just be conscientious of those people, I think, for those of us that are not engaged in that, and have a sense
Right.
of gratitude that we're in a position where we're in essence luckier.
Right.
We won the lotto in a sense, and maybe we worked towards it, whatever. But people work towards whatever they did. I don't think any ICU nurse expected to be dealing with this. They expected to be dealing with disease and
That's
some
right.
communicable diseases, but not something like this where there still really isn't a complete answer as to what's going on. And it's the same with people in law enforcement or firefighters, things of that nature. So it's more of an attitude of looking from within. So the people that I work with on a general role, putting aside the teachers, policemen, frontline workers, convenience store workers, I think people in general are just frustrated by the state of affairs we live in.
That's it.
Social unrest,
Mm.
COVID, a lot of the unknowns around it, and justifiably so.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, what do you do about it?
Right.
What do you do about it?
Right.
I'll give you a for instance, like, they call it, I don't know if you've heard this term, the COVID 15.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I'm trying to work off the COVID 15. It's probably gone beyond 19 with me. So I'm going on power walks, 5 to 6
Right.
times a week. So I generally try to go into areas that are somewhat remote. And
Yeah.
even though I'm not running, when you're walking at a fast pace, it's a little uncomfortable to have a mask on. You're sort of breathing in carbon monoxide. But I take it off when possible, always look at my surroundings, and then I'll put it on when I'm at a great distance from
Mm-hmm.
50 feet. I put it on. And I notice that when someone else is doing the same thing, we're almost doing it simultaneously.
Right.
There's a sense of connectedness that's going on, even though it's not about the mass per se. It's just about, you know what, I respect you and you
Right.
respect me.
Yeah.
I don't know who you are. I'm probably not going to see
Right.
you again.
Right.
The sense of community in that in
Yes.
3 seconds that we
Pass each other.
or pass each other.
Yeah.
And people that are, say, running, that really, it's really difficult to run with a mask. They're
Right.
heading towards me, and they go way out of their way to circle around me, just out
Yeah.
of respect, or on a bike, the same thing.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
see that, and to me, that's very heartwarming. That it's
Yeah.
not about the mask. It's a sense that, you know what, we're all in this together. And
I'm looking out for you.
yeah, and you're
Yeah.
necessarily looking out for me.
Right.
And, we experienced a lot of this after 9/11, the unfortunate incident of 9/11. If you recall, there was
Yeah.
really a sense of community that went
Yeah.
on. People were much more polite and gracious and thoughtful once we sort of got out of that haze, which I know I was in a bit of a haze for a week or two because I was working in the city at the time. So
Wow.
it was pretty wild, pretty crazy. But this is different.
Yeah.
This is like every man and woman for themselves, right? Remember the
Yeah.
toilet paper and tissue
Yeah.
paper?
Yeah.
What's happening again, by the way.
I kept asking myself, what's so important about toilet paper?
Yeah, people have lived without it, right? What's so important about Bounty towels? We've gotten accustomed to it. And listen, I use them.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's just a mentality of, you know what? There's 2 of those left on the shelf. Am I going to grab? I mean, it may sound silly, but I don't think it is. I'm going to grab the last 2. I'm going to leave one for somebody just I'm never going to see again. Nobody's going to know per se that I took the last one, but I'm doing something for my neighbor, which I think, unfortunately, less and less of that is happening right now.
Right.
People just grabbing.
Right. Right.
A lot of that, and
Yeah.
it's disheartening to me because there's a lack of I think thoughtfulness and maybe gratitude for what you have, and just grateful for the fact that you have neighbors, that you have a community in your own small little way. You're looking out for them by leaving that last thing on the shelf.
Absolutely.
One little tiny way.
Yeah. Yeah. It's those little things that leave a signal of humanity.
Definitely.
Right. That, it's really not just, but here, I mean, the other part of that is this, that, we get in a mode of survival where you see when you panic, you don't think, so it's like you get into this mode of, I need to gather to survive, even if you don't need it. You know, it's not like the world is coming to an end, because it sounds like, oh, the world is coming to an end, right? I'm in panic mode. All I can see is I need my kids to have paper towels. You know?
Right.
And you have your garage full of paper towels,
Exactly.
you know? So it just leads to sometimes illogical behavior.
Very much so, and thoughtless behavior. It's one
Right.
thing, Phil, if we were having this conversation in 1943,
Oh,
say, and it was World War II.
right.
I think there'd be good reason to kind of go that way, because it would
Absolutely.
legitimately,
Nuclear bomb kind of a thing.
and depending
Yeah.
on where we were living,
Hmm.
things are at a real fever pitch. It's tough right now. There's a lot of unknowns, but it isn't Armageddon, and I think people
Right.
who treat it as such are not only harming others, they're harming themselves,
Right.
because what's happening, their anxiety level is going up. They are having a sort of hoard mentality, not just in terms of tissue paper, but in
Hmm.
terms of their approach to everyday living. And
Right.
that's creating a real sense of insulation
Right.
from others, which
Hmm.
contribute to greater sense of depression, anxiety, obsessiveness. I must
Right.
get this, I must get that, I must. And it's very hard to function normally that way. So you had said earlier that a lot of people in my profession are busier than ever. Unfortunately, that is one of the contributors to it. That
Mm.
there's a base level of anxiety I don't think that any of us can avoid. But then there's a sense of anxiety on top of anxiety that it's self-generated. And that's
Mm.
kind of what I want to focus on a little bit, is the
Right.
self-generated anxiety, not the external forces that we don't have any control over, but the internal world. And I think I spoke about this a little bit in the relationship series. The
Yes.
internal world, remember we spoke about people in prison sometimes
Mm.
feeling the most liberated because they had a time to reflect. It's not the ideal way to come about that, but it is sometimes a byproduct of people being in a situation where they don't have much control, and they
Mm.
look within themselves. If we look within ourselves right now, we can make a bad situation much better, or a challenging situation even gratifying in some way.
Hmm.
I was talking to you earlier about the fact that even with the mask and the walking, that what I try to do, and I try to impart upon my clients, is that when I have the mask on, it's not the easiest thing to breathe with
Right.
it, but it's all
That's, yeah.
relative. It's all relative. The people that you mentioned, the I talk
Hmm.
about the nurses or the physicians or law enforcement, they may have to wear this for 6 hours at a clip. Most of us don't have to do that. And if we're wearing it for a few minutes and it feels uncomfortable, then we take it down. To me, there's a sense of gratitude that I could breathe fresh air.
Mm.
And not everybody has that luxury.
Right.
Corona
Right.
or
True. That's
corona.
it.
There are
Yeah.
people that are on ventilators because of asthmatic conditions or COPD or things of that nature. Unfortunately, have
Hmm.
lung cancer or things of that sort. They
Hmm.
can't do that right now.
Mm.
So if you take stock of the fact that whoever you want to thank, you could thank the flowers, the trees, higher power,
Right.
whatever it is.
Right. Right.
Just the gratitude that I could breathe fresh air.
Hmm.
And this is forcing us to sort of pare things down a little bit. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. For
Hmm.
people who aren't ill and don't have loved ones that are ill, I have to qualify it. It's, if you have somebody
Right.
in the hospital right now, or you're in the
Mhm.
hospital, again, that's a more difficult ask. But I don't think that's the case for most of us. I think most of us, at least I've known a lot of people that have had COVID, but have come through the other side of it, thank God. Well,
Hmm.
um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but the little things that maybe we just take for granted, like the sun coming up every morning, we just take it for granted.
Right.
Why,
Right.
why should it come up every morning? Just because it has for every day in your life? You know what I mean? Why not show
Right.
gratitude to that? Because COVID can't take that away.
Hmm.
Social
Exactly right.
media can't take that away, or social injustice. It's not going to take away the sun coming up in the
Hmm.
morning, or the moon and the stars coming out at night. But my argument to these folks is embrace that a little bit more. Some people
Right.
automatically do that. They have a nature to be grateful and to,
Hmm.
you know, show grace towards that. But a lot of people don't. And when you do that, that's going to calm your system
Right.
better than any medicine that's out there.
Hmm.
Better than any medicine.
You know, I was we were talking about that, just kind of like having a thought that's going to start your day on a balance, on a level. And that leads into like my next question, like specifically, like what are some of the actions that we can take to get a sense of balance, like during this period? What are some of the step-by-step things we can do?
Well, I think, one of the things that I mentioned and I do, but I try to impart upon my clients is take advantage if you're working remotely, for example. There are going to be more opportunities to take advantage of the outside. The weather is still, here in New York, the weather is still very nice. Even when it's not quote unquote very nice, we can still take advantage of it. It's good to be in motion.
Hmm.
About the good COVID-19, I think we all need to take stock about eating a little bit healthier. I know you've had guests on that have talked about nutrition and
Right.
things of that nature. So I think it's important to amp that up a little bit,
Hmm.
to amp up self-care,
Okay.
uh, so that you balance out the external forces. Again, nobody could stop you from running, power walk, working out. Uh, Gyms are opening up in some areas, but where gyms aren't open, you could work out at home, right?
Right.
I remember
Right.
a video with Arnold Schwarzenegger when he was in a hotel room somewhere
Uh,
on the road, and he gave a demonstration of he took like a desk chair and started doing curls with the desk chair,
yeah. Yeah.
and doing like you probably know a little bit about it, almost like the equivalent of like push-ups against the side of his bed.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, things of
Absolutely.
that nature. So you could do that at home,
Right.
even if you don't have the equipment. Some people
Hmm.
have the equipment and it's easier. So I think it's more about the fact that you need to empower yourself to take advantage of things that you might even not normally be able to take advantage of.
Hmm.
Even for
Hmm.
those that are unemployed,
Right.
don't just sit
Right.
and sulk.
Hmm.
Get your health in order.
Right.
Get yourself
Take
in
a class. I mean,
a class.
yeah.
All aspects of health: emotional,
Hmm.
intellectual, physical,
Absolutely.
spiritual.
Yeah. I mean, there's a website. I mean, they're not paying me to promote them, but Ariel.com.
Well, they should.
It's yeah, it's I know. I might give them a phone call.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
they have like free classes that you could take on like HR services and things like that that can just keep your brain active
Right.
around maybe learning a different you know line of work. I mean, it can really, most of us think, well, I got to put out all this money to maybe get a degree or a certificate.
Right.
There's some free online classes that are available out there.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's all part of health. Is feeding your mind, feeding your spirit, feeding your body, feeding it all, and it's there for the taking. If you're able to have an attitude of gratitude, as it were,
Hmm.
right? Grateful that I have the opportunity, and for some people, it can be beneficial to have a reset, even if it's externally imposed. Some
Right.
people may need a reset anyway in their lives because they weren't doing so well prior to the COVID situation.
Right.
So
Right.
everything that exists can be flipped on its head if we
Right.
choose to. While at the same
Yes.
time knowing that we're human and we're all
Hmm.
going to have better days and maybe not such better days, and that's okay. As
Hmm.
long as you don't live in that state of misery and resentment. And that's where I have to come in with the folks I work with.
So no, let me. That's the. But I think that's difficult, especially if you're on the higher end of that anxiety, right? How do you bring yourself down? Like you worked up, you just watched the news and you see political anxiety. You have hurricanes coming down south. You have all these different things, and these are things you can't control. You're just kind of like in this world, your anxiety is high.
Yep.
How do you, when you identify, first of all, how do you identify that you're there? And then how do you bring yourself back down? Because you have to identify it first.
Sure. Sure. I think, people will have, quite frankly, an easier time identifying when they're there, because they notice that they're just preoccupied 24/7 with the events of the world or events of the day. So they're aware usually that this is hampering them because they're obsessing and ruminating about it all the time. So the awareness level usually is there.
Okay.
The step 2 is the more difficult part. What do you do when you're aware that it's a high level, and not just get into the justification mode for experiencing it, which is the natural inclination for most people. It's very easy to justify being at that high level. Most of the people that are at that level 10 were already 8s or 9s before all this unrest took place. COVID, the social unrest, the political situation, they were already high anxiety.
Right.
So now they're at the top of the heap. So what I try to do, Phil, is, as it is with many clients, I've talked about this before. I don't try to set the bar too high.
Okay.
It would make me sound good if I can make somebody go from a 10 to a 0, and maybe get even more phone calls from the people out there. I don't want to be deceptive. I think we have to be somewhat pragmatic.
Right.
If somebody can go from a 10 to a 7 or a 6, or maybe a 5. 5 would be ideal.
5 would be ideal. Yeah.
Because for people like this, they tend to go in extremes. So what oftentimes coincides with anxiety is a sort of mood disorder, where they fluctuate, where they can be anxious 1 minute and exhilarated the next minute, or completely down in the dumps the next minute. So if they keep 5, I always use that number with people because 5 represents the mid zone. And for people who struggle with extremes, they tend to have a hard time finding that place. So on a very practical, logistical level, I try to get people to do things that are going to make them feel calmer, that have nothing to do with the external world. So on a practical level, we talked about this before. Cable news is not news. It's infotainment. Shut off the TV. Watch it. You have control over that remote control. Only put it on. You want to check things out periodically online, or maybe get an alert once or twice a day from a reputable news source. That's fine.
Yeah.
Shut that off, and then do things that inherently will make you feel less anxious. I had a client who, of all things, I didn't think this was going to be something that she would choose, but she told me, I told her that you need to pick up a hobby. You need to do something that's going to take your mind away from the everyday events. She had spoken to a friend of hers, who was sort of financially oriented, and he recommended that you should buy a few stocks, that she dip her toes in the water. She never did it before. The last person I thought that would do it. And she was proud to say, I bought this and I bought that, and I had to be careful about her not like obsessing about looking at the fluctuations within
because you're adopting a whole new level of anxiety.
Yeah, I don't want to become a day trader. That would not be a good thing. But she said, no, I'll check it like once a day, or maybe once every couple of days. And I think it's kind of fun to see. I didn't invest that much. But it's something, when she's immersed in that, she started smiling when she was talking about it. It was her realm of thinking. And that, for those few minutes in that hour or whatever, she's not thinking about the other stuff. So, and the anxiety level inevitably is going to go down. It's not going to be at a 10. It's not. Regardless of what happens with the stock. It's just like, it's such little money. It's more the idea of, I'm in this game and this is kind of fun. It's a game.
Right. Exactly. And it does take your mind. You're focusing. You're regaining your focus. To something that you can enjoy. Something that you can enjoy. So before, as we're at this midpoint, before we get into like the next set of questions, but tell the folks where and how they can reach you. I know it's on the banner, but
Sure.
just tell them a few ways that they can reach out to you. Especially if they want to get in more detail, personalized details, because everyone is dealing with something different,
Sure.
but I want them to be able to reach out to you. So tell us a few ways you can do that.
Sure. You go to my website, which is jarotherapyny.com. I can be reached directly at 917-843-4399. I'm on Facebook as well, so people could find me on there. And basically, if people have questions, and we'll get into more details within this segment, but if people have questions about this, they can feel free to call me about this in general, just the whole idea of how to cope with challenging circumstances that exist around them, especially the ones that exist now. And I don't want to sound Pollyannish about this. I know this situation is challenging. It is for me. It is for all of us. But I want to just go to a different place with this with people, because they can hear from their friends how terrible things are and sort of commiserate with them, and maybe there's some level of comfort that people can get from that. But I try to get people, if they're willing and interested, to go to another level, not just to a sense of like acceptance, but actually you could even thrive under what appears to be very adverse circumstances. So I'd be more than happy to talk to people more about how you could thrive in a crisis situation.
Right.
Just
Right.
essentially what we're in now.
I mean, on the flip side, I mean, we can. There is the anxiety that people have about just how to cope with their kids. Now, I mean, I think it's tough for them, but when it comes to your children, it's like a whole different emotion takes place, because it's not that you can't even, you're trying to maintain your own sanity, but now you're concerned about your children and how they're perceiving the world and how it's going on. I had a chance to speak to a young person the other day, and they were just really concerned about having kids. They were in their, well, at the age of like 21, they're in their 20s.
Sure.
And they were like, I'm not sure if I even want to get in a process of, engaging in that, because their world 10 years from now looks like chaos, right?
Sure.
So I mean, what would you say to like a young person that's, they're coming into the world, and they've just maybe graduated college, and they're like really kind of frantic about what their future looks like?
Sure. Well, I'll try to take it one at a time. In terms of, again, I'm not going to argue with people if they decide, because of the nature of what they're viewing, that they don't want to have children. That's certainly a personal choice. I would explore it with people and try to understand the underpinnings to it. But after exploring that and exploring the underpinnings to it, they come to that conclusion. They have every right to do that, because I'm not trying to, pretend that these are normal times.
Right.
But that being said, a lot of the issues that you're describing exist and existed with kids prior to all this happening. This has been an issue that's been going on, at least in my practice, I would say, way predates Corona or some of the political tensions. And there's always political tensions, but the more heightened political tensions, it's predated that for a while. Just a sense of futility and sort of being lost, and et cetera. So I think that, again, it boils down to attitude about things.
Okay.
It boils down to attitude. If you feel that there are certain fears that you have that are holding you back, that needs to be acknowledged for sure.
Right.
But then it's to what? Okay.
Right.
Now that we acknowledge this, now that we acknowledge it exists, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And really look at your choice carefully, because people just make these choices and then tacitly will have it accepted, or think they'll have it accepted, because society is basically telling you these times are not normal. So, for lack of a better way of expressing this, it's almost like you get a pass.
Right.
This is COVID time. This is political unrest. This is social upheaval. No. It's now. Now, what do you do? What do you do about this? What choices are you going to make to empower yourself under these adverse circumstances. And maybe opportunities exist right now in ways that maybe you haven't even considered if you have a certain skill set or you develop a certain skill set. But I can't not acknowledge the fears. I have them myself to a certain extent. I think we have to sort of suspend a little bit of belief in order to function. Because if we really thought about this day in and day out, we'd all be immobilized. But that's the point. We can't and shouldn't think about it day in and day out. Because
right.
Right
now you're just obsessing over it, and you're not thinking about all the aspects.
Well, if I was thinking about that right now, like we're thinking about it because it's being raised, but if I was ruminating about it and thinking about it to the point where it was affecting me greatly, or you were right now, we wouldn't be able to have this conversation.
Right.
You know,
yeah,
we both might be on the floor, so there would be a visual.
Right? Joel, you're wrong.
Who knows? We just collapse from the exhaustion thinking about all these things. But we have to maintain a certain semblance of balance, right, and normalcy. And for people who are having a hard time achieving that, strive for it. And what I had this point in mind, but it slipped out, but I want to inject it now, is that when you talked about the fears of parents regarding their younger, their young children or young adult children, or the fears of young adults, it goes back to the expression of, who guaranteed us that we were going to have a life of luxury, because we live in our case, we live in the United States in 2020. So that was a guarantee that we were never going to run out of Bounty towels or Charmin tissue paper, or that we were going to be able to eat in every restaurant we wanted when we wanted to at any time. No.
Wrestling in the aisles for Bounty paper.
But nothing of this was real. Nothing was really guaranteed. It just happened to be the norm.
Right.
What we're quote unquote struggling with right now is really the norm in most third world countries. We're worrying about whether we can get Bounty towels or Viva towels or this one. They're lucky if they can get a piece of paper.
Right. Exactly.
So I know people say, "Oh, you're being melodramatic. I don't live in a third world country." Well, luckily you don't. And show some gratitude for that.
That's
I serve you, not to serve, if anything, to serve yourself.
You hit a point with that, because when I had a chance to go and visit the Philippines, right? And there are people that are living in huts, and there are people that are living nicely, which is everywhere, but then you go and you find that there are people that are just really the things that even the people in poverty here have.
Right.
They would look at that as, man, you are living.
Right.
You're living it up, because they don't even have the basic just to kind of get food. The thing that is like the thing that we can go in the store and say, hey, or we have like a donation place down the street.
Soup kitchens.
Soup kitchens. Soup kitchen. It's like you have a soup kitchen. What? And it is so. I mean, it is so easy to be grateful when you have explored not just like the American state of mind, but you've traveled the world, and you've seen where what I have is a gift. Everything we have here is a gift, and it's like, yeah, we work hard, and I may have an excess of it, or I may have just enough of it, but the fact that I'm able to attain it is a gift.
Absolutely.
And that's what gratitude, like you said, like even just breathing. There are people who are trying to breathe right now. They are like, if they could have a normal breath of air, they would pay millions of dollars just to get it.
Sure.
But no money in the world is going to give them that.
No.
Right? Because they're on a ventilator. They are struggling for their life. They're fighting for their life. And, we need to respect that. really, I mean, and like you said, just kind of like thinking about the other person. Like seriously, there are 200,000 people that have died because of COVID. The process of them dying, I mean, we talk about them dying, but we don't talk about the process of them dying. It's hard. I can't even imagine having to not being able to breathe because they basically suffocated
It's horrible, and dying alone.
and dying alone, away
It's
from family.
yeah. Again, I just think there has to be an acknowledgement of this. I know that it may be
Right.
for people to sort of get too immersed in this level of thinking because it
Mm.
can overtake you. But I think there has to be a tacit acknowledgement of the fact that we're lucky. But at the same time, I understand that people have fears that they may end up in that position, and
Hmm.
therefore they're acting prudently. Which again, prudently is the operative word, not
Mm.
obsessively, but prudently.
Right.
And nobody has all the answers, but it seems as though the prudent thing to do is to the no-brainer is washing your hands, wearing a mask when you're within 6 feet of people. That it's at least in New York that seems to turn things around a bit, and
Mm.
it's not really that big an ask, right? When you think about it. Other than
Right.
that, we can live our lives, and you know what? There's to me, this may sound a little crazy, but there's something inherently positive that's going on about the fact that we
Right.
can't do whatever we want to do at every given moment,
Hmm.
that we actually expand.
Exactly.
There's a concept that's talked about in the Kabbalah in the Jewish religion, Philip,
Yes. Uh-huh.
that when we're contracting, as a woman has contractions during birth,
Mhm.
we're actually expanding at the same time. That there's an expansion from contraction. By limiting ourselves, we're actually growing because
Wow.
there's something to be said about unlimited choice.
Hmm.
And it's joking a little bit about, but it's not so much of a joke about the paper towels. We have
Right.
unlimited everything here, and the fact that things are limited now to a certain extent, certainly not limited to people in the Philippines, that we can be considered luxury what we have, and then some
Right.
right now. But the fact
Exactly.
that in our first world view, we're limited in terms of,
Mm.
say, eating at certain restaurants. Unfortunately, I feel bad for the business owners. Certain restaurants have closed, or other
Hmm.
businesses have closed, and my heart goes out to them, which is horrible. That's a horrible aspect of this. But for the people
Mm.
that are not directly affected by that, maybe you cook more meals at home.
Wow.
Maybe you
Right.
spend more time with your family and actually have conversations. Is that a bad thing? To realize that nothing is a given, including the sun coming up tomorrow morning, Phil.
Right. Right.
It's not. And I was lucky that I was taught that at a very early age.
Mm.
Not to think that anything because it happens on a regular basis means it's going to happen tomorrow.
Right. Right.
As you
Right.
and as you
Wow.
can see, things could be turned upside down in a day,
Hmm.
right? Whether it be a tsunami or a virus that sort of creeps up on you, but then just sort of like took on a world of its own, or
Right.
upheavals. We're not entitled to anything, and we're not entitled to predictability. And that's what I try to impart upon my clients. We're not entitled to it. We get acclimated to it, but it doesn't mean it's going to be there tomorrow or even tonight.
Right. Right.
So, I mean, this is
Absolutely.
getting on a deeper level, but I think when you start thinking this way, you could actually see what's happening now on some level to be a blessing. On
Yeah.
some level.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. My final question for you, Joel, because we are definitely, I'm enjoying this conversation. I think it's really something that we all need to kind of like start working on processing, on getting some sort of balance in our thinking. But my final question would be, why is practicing gratitude so important? Why is
Well,
practicing gratitude so
I think it ties into what I was just saying earlier. I think when
important?
we have that attitude, we supersede the external world.
Wow.
And it's almost irrelevant what's happening around us. When we have that attitude, it has benefits that I think can't even be measured in terms of obviously the mental health benefits, because we're calming our system down, but the system also includes our physiological system, which affects mood. So
Right.
our mood is elevated.
Mm-hmm.
Our sense of self is more defined.
Mm-hmm.
Our sense of community and appreciation for the people around us that we love is heightened.
Right.
Our appreciation for nature and
Mm-hmm.
the world that exists that has nothing to do with our doing,
Mm-hmm.
whether it be the grass underneath your feet or beautiful mountains that you might choose to hike as a way to sort of decompress
Mm-hmm.
stresses of dealing with a crisis. On and on, going for a nice swim.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
Grateful that the oceans exist or lakes exist. These opportunities exist moment to moment for us, literally. The fact that we have this technology to engage in a conversation like this, as much as there's some toxicity attached to technology, and we've talked about this before, and so
Right. Right.
some of the toxic elements of social media, but we wouldn't be able to be doing this right now if it wasn't for the technology. So I
Right.
think we all need to, including myself, just heighten. And thankfully, I was taught at a younger age to do this. But you know, the key is to do it consistently, not even
Right.
on a day-to-day basis, on a moment-by-moment basis, to have that sense, and you will feel calmer.
Wow.
And it doesn't matter what's happening around you, who's the president, what's going on in terms of stats around pandemics, um, different climate issues, whatever they may be, different crises. We have us.
Right.
We always have
Right.
us in relation to.
Right.
It's us in relation to.
Two. Yes.
Fill in the
Yeah.
blank. What it is it we're in
Exactly.
relation to. And nobody could take away that part.
I love that. I appreciate you bringing that to the forefront. And for those who are watching, listen, we're not ignoring that there are things that we all need to deal with.
Not at all.
That's really not the approach we're taking. We're just saying that you pull back, take a look from a different perspective, from a perspective of gratitude, and then looking at the problem from that perspective, and you will see it in a different light.
I
And
wanted to
go
give
ahead.
an example, Phil. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I was thinking about this. This might bring it to the forefront. And I'm glad you qualified that. But this is
Yes,
just a different perspective. Not to say that any of the concerns or fears aren't valid.
real,
But I'm
right?
just trying to shine a different light on this. The
Mm,
example that I would give is, both of us wear corrective lenses, right? Both have glasses on. If you
right.
put on mine and I put on yours, the odds are we both be like sideways and upside down and who knows where. There's a reason why we have a specific prescription. And I think what happens is when we're not in a state of gratitude, I'm wearing your glasses in a sense.
Wow.
I'm not seeing things clearly. So the thing is to change the lens so that it fits the nature of your
You're
condition, so that
right,
you can
exactly.
see things clearly.
Clearer.
What
Yes.
happens is we get caught up in a sense of resentment and
Mm,
anger and frustration and all those negative sort of emotions. We don't have the proper lens on, and
right.
you're gonna get dizzy if I wore your glasses and you
Wow.
wore mine.
Yeah, that's true.
Sick,
Right.
probably
Exactly.
nauseous.
Yeah.
That's how you
Yeah.
walk around all day. When you
Yeah.
have the proper sight, then
Yeah.
your vision is clear.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. You get a truer sense of where things are.
that's
Yeah, absolutely.
clear,
Absolutely.
the clearest perception that you could have.
Right. Right. That is awesome. That is so cool, man. Thank you so much
My pleasure.
for sharing what you I mean, I'd love that. I'm really receiving from what you've been saying throughout this program, and it is so true. For those of you that are listening and just watching in, Joel is a psychotherapist, and he does personal appointments. So feel free to reach out to him. He's making himself available on the program, which I'm truly honored to have him here. And
My pleasure.
thank you, Joel. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Phil. I'm honored to be with you. And this is, to share these moments, hopefully this can be a model for other people to share moments, maybe not precisely like this, but to share moments with other individuals and connect and break bread and, you know, realize that we're all in this together.
That's it. Absolutely, man. Absolutely. So we're going to be signing off now, but we're going to have Karen Mayo. She's going to be coming on and talking about mindful eating. Our watching our diet and kind of like giving us cues on what we can put in our bodies to create balance again. Joel, it's amazing, man. Thank you so much.
It really was a pleasure.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And we will see you guys in a few minutes.